Hi and welcome to My Outdoors. My name's Davey Wright and I am here at Kendal Mountain Festival and just now I'm going to talk to Anna Taylor.
Hi.
Anna, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Not at all, it's an absolute pleasure.
Oh,
I've been looking forward to catching up with you, I've been trying really hard to catch up with you over the festival because obviously you've been up to a few big events, or a few big projects in the last couple of years. So
yeah, there's been the odd thing.
So I suppose the best place to start is a bit of an introduction to yourself. How did you get going with climbing and get into the projects that you've done recently?
Sure. So I started climbing initially when I was 10 years old. My dad was kind of into climbing when he was younger, and he just started taking me to our local climbing wall, which is Kendal Wall, about 10 minutes down the road from where we are now. And I kind of just took to it straight away. I think because I've got quite a short attention span, I get bored very easily. So with a lot of sports that are quite sort of full of repetition, you know, like, I mean, I quite enjoy cycling and running, but it's kind of the same thing whenever you do it. But with climbing, everything's different, every climb's different, every route's different. And I really took to the variety of it. And then I got into competitions a little bit when I was younger, which didn't really agree with me, and I actually quit climbing for a few years until I was about 19 when I got back into it, and from there moved pretty much straight away into outdoor trad climbing. And when I started climbing in that style, something really clicked. I got really into the sort of head games of bold trad head pointing, you know, situations where you've kind of got to switch off your brain and climb into a situation where you absolutely can't fall off. And that eventually led to wanting to do more adventurous type trips. And in 2019, I was incredibly lucky when I got an opportunity from a friend of mine, Leo Houlding, to go out to Guyana. And I guess we can talk about this a little bit more later. There's
definitely.
Film that's coming out about that experience tonight. And that sort of fueled my love for these longer format sort of suffer type expeditions. And that pretty much brings us up to where I am now.
So you mentioned you had that break after, or you did a bit of competition climbing.
Yes.
Was it the competition climbing that caused the break?
Kind of, yeah. I think it's because I hadn't been exposed to outdoor climbing much because I was very young, and obviously traditional climbing isn't something that a lot of 12-year-olds really get into. Just something about the competition environment I just didn't really sit well with me. I think particularly at youth competitions you just sit around for hours and you only really get to climb through routes, and it just wasn't that enjoyable. I think that was probably what caused the break.
So in the break, was there any climbing, or was it other things to fill that time? Bits
here and there. I got really into music. I played bass guitar, and I spent my time basically playing in bands for a few years. And it was actually through one of these bands that the other members were into climbing. They were all at Lancaster University, where there's a little climbing wall, and they pretty much got me back into it.
Right.
So it kind of
so music brought you back to climbing?
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. So that then, we'll get into it now. That then fueled the call from Leo to take you on a big adventure.
Yes, so when I initially got this offer from Leo, I didn't know him at all.
Right.
The only experience I'd ever had with him was when I was 11 years old, when he came to do an assembly at my school, and I literally hadn't seen him since.
Okay.
But exactly 10
I'm sure
years
that
later...
makes him really old.
Yeah, sorry, Leo, if you watch this.
Sorry.
He's going to love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, literally 10 years later, we were on an expedition together, which is hilarious.
Okay.
I think how it came about was Berghaus was sort of after a female ambassador that was into the more adventurous side of climbing, and through a couple of mutual friends, I guess my name came into the conversation. And
you're fairly local to each other, we're both Lake District based.
Extremely local to each other, we literally live 5 minutes away from
each other.
Yeah. I met up with him, and I remember he had this kind of like photo album on his laptop, and he showed me this picture of this crazy looking mountain out in the jungle in Guyana, sort of the likes of which I'd never seen before in my life. And he basically gave me the offer, do you want to come on this expedition? And I was absolutely terrified, but I had to say yes, because when do you get an opportunity like that?
Exactly.
And literally 6 months later, we were off.
You're off, bags packed.
Yep.
So how did you, and that's your first kind of big expedition type climb, and so how did you find the preparation for that?
The preparation it was more than I was expecting. I mean, just in terms of like packing, the amount of stuff that it turns out you need for a month-long expedition into the middle of nowhere, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And for me, I was going into this with absolutely no knowledge of anything that we were going to do. I was the only girl on the team, and I was at least 10 years younger than everyone else there, which was a bit of an unusual situation.
So if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you went on the...
How old was I?
Yes.
I was 21.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so pretty young. And I just sort of accepted early on that I was going to have to learn everything as I went. But yeah, it was great. It was such an alien situation at the start, but after like a week or so, the guys I was with that are absolutely great, and they never made me feel like I was, sort of inferior to them, even though I had so little knowledge of what we were doing. And within a couple of weeks, it just felt totally normal. And
how did you prepare fitness-wise?
Fitness-wise, I wasn't really sure what I should do. So all I did was just do loads of climbing training, kind of similar to what I would normally do. But in hindsight, probably what I should have done, the start of this expedition was a massive jungle trek for 2 weeks just to get to the bottom of this wall. And it turns out that jungle trekking in, really intense heat with really heavy packs on is really hard. So I kind of wish I'd just done loads of walking up big hills in a sauna or something like that. That would have been better training.
Acclimatization
training. So I don't know if anything I did really paid off at all.
I did follow the expedition on the Adventure podcast, Matt's podcast. So I was listening to it while I was in the car, thinking, wow, sounds like a hardship. But like you say, you settle into it, and it seemed that everybody's kind of settled into it, and there was a lot of mud involved, and I've seen some of the pictures following it.
The first week when we covered the ground between this, we flew into a little indigenous village, and the trek from there to, I say the base of the wall, there's a big ridge that you have to walk up. It's about the size of Ben Nevis that gets you to the bottom of the rock face that we climbed. So from the village to the bottom of that took us a week, and the weather was extremely kind to us. So it was hard, there were long days with heavy packs, but it was really sunny and beautiful, and it kind of did feel like a holiday.
Right.
But then we got a bit caught out when we got to the bottom of this ridge. The plan was to spend the next week sort of ferrying all our stuff up to the bottom of the rock face in loads, so we were going up and down every day. But the wet season started, and it literally just pissed it down for hours on end every single day, and suddenly it didn't feel like a holiday anymore.
I saw some of the pictures that came out of it of when you were hauling and things like that up through.
It made for some pretty good photos. It was kind of fun. Like the first couple of times, it's like an adventure playground. It's quite fun just to get utterly plastered in mud, and but the novelty wears off, I can assure you.
I bet it did. I bet it did. So eventually you get to the foot of the actual wall, and then it's go time. That's when the climbing training kicked in, did it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in theory. It was kind of weird because it felt like just the 2 weeks it taken us to get there, it felt like much longer because we'd just been living in the jungle for all that time. And it was weird that we were sort of only really halfway there, and we hadn't even started the main objective yet. And this rock face that we climbed up, it's just so steep. We saw it, we flew in, we airdropped a lot of the stuff at the bottom of the wall before we landed in the village. So we saw this rock face from the air, and it's just like you can't imagine climbing on it. It's just so obviously, when there's ropes hanging down it, you can see on the pictures, they're miles away from the rock face. But weirdly, it's sort of the way the rock forms, it's riddled with these kind of really big horizontal breaks.
Right.
So it's actually got quite a lot of really good holds on it. The only problem with these breaks is they're absolutely full of spiders and scorpions.
How are you with spiders and scorpions?
Fortunately, I'm pretty good with spiders and stuff like that. But they're pretty massive, some of these things, like bigger than your hand. Okay. Sometimes you'd be sitting in one of our wall camps and you'd just be looking at one of these cracks, and these two little feelers would just start coming out, and then the rest of the legs would follow. So it's an interesting experience.
From obviously the films that Leo's done before, he's always, I feel he's always kind of taken people as part of his team as they kind of nurture their passion for adventure. Probably yourself to get to experience. I suppose you don't get experience by sitting reading a book, do you? Get experience by doing it. So did you learn a lot? Yeah. I learned so much, really. It's again, particularly because
even in the technical sense of just being on a big wall and all the rope stuff, I knew absolutely nothing. But yeah, I think it was great being around those guys, because I think in a lot of ways the most important thing being on these trips is just sort of being able to suffer but keep up the good humour.
Yes.
Because when you start letting yourself start feeling down and sort of feeling sorry for yourself, it really does become miserable.
Yes.
But we had an amazing team dynamic, and I think that's probably the most important thing they taught me, was just to keep spirits up when you're living in some like really
I think you have to be allowed to have your down days, and there'll be others who will have their up days, and that balances it out.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we all had moments that were pretty bad. I remember one specifically for me. We had the last camp that wasn't a wall camp was sort of on the top of this massive Ben Nevis sized ridge, and there were no trees up there, so we couldn't have a hammock camp, and it was kind of just like living in a swamp. It was the most miserable situation I think I've ever been in. And I was doing most of the cooking and trying to cook for, we were a team of 8 at this point, there's 6 of us and 2 Indigenous guys that joined us. And oh god, just trying to keep everything out of the mud and keep on top of stuff was just horrific, and that was definitely a down moment for me. But yeah, I mean, having people, particularly like there's a guy called Waldo Etherington on the team that just, I don't know if he ever feels down about anything. He's just the most optimistic guy I've ever met.
I've only seen him on films and on social media, and he's genuinely the most upbeat and
it's kind of impossible to stay in a bad mood if he's around you.
Well, that's good. It's good to have people like that.
It is, for sure.
So that's good. So the team is good. Obviously, the film actually premieres tonight. So and you said you haven't seen it either?
I haven't seen it yet. No.
Okay. So you're waiting for the big reveal.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. And it was 2 years ago now, so.
Well, that's it. Well, still. How does it sit in your memory now? Like, how does the experience sort of sit with you now? Obviously, it's hard, and what have you taken away from it?
It's just the best thing I've ever done, for sure. I mean, it opened my eyes so much more to the possibilities of, you know, where climbing can take you in the world. And I think, as I said at the start, it really it started a love for these kind of longer format trips. And obviously the more recent one I've done, it's a very different thing, but similar in the sense that you're out on your own or with a small team for a long period of time. It's just suffering, basically. But I do quite enjoy it. Yeah, I think it's good for you to an extent.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So, well, that kind of takes us kind of naturally onto the most recent trip. Can you tell our expedition, and it's all kind of local, if you like. It's a UK expedition. Tell us about that.
So I came up with this originally in 2020 when COVID hit and the world everything was shut down. And I really wanted to go on another kind of expedition, but I knew that international travel for a long time was going to be pretty sketchy.
Unfortunately.
Exactly. So I wanted to come up with something that I could do in the UK. And there's a challenge in the Lake District called the Classic Rock Round, which Classic Rock is a guidebook, right? It's 83 of what the author Ken Wilson decided were the best routes up to the Grade of VS in the UK. And there's this challenge in the Lake District that involves running there's 15 of them in the lakes, fell running between them all within the space of 24 hours, which I haven't done yet, but I tried in the summer of 2020. I tried it with Leo, actually, from the Guyana expedition. And we failed miserably due to most people prepare when they attempt this thing. Like they do the running in sections and they practice the climb so they know where they go. And we decided to just go for a total on-site of the round, which did work quite well until we got caught out by the weather. It's a long story, but we ended up at Pillar Rock at 2 o'clock in the morning. It was one of those. But regardless, I really enjoyed it. So the running around the mountains, doing loads of easy mileage with the climbs. And I thought it would be really cool to do a human-powered link-up of all of the classic rock routes in the UK. So starting down in Cornwall and finishing up on the Isle of Skye. Obviously...
Sounds like a good idea.
Yes, I thought so. Not running between them, so I got myself a touring bike at least.
Okay. And have you done much touring bike cycling before?
No. The first time I'd ever ridden a bike with panniers on was literally the night I set off. Which, I mean, it did kind of work out, but I did underestimate. I wanted to do it completely self-supported, so I carried all my climbing kit with me in the bike panniers as I went, and I definitely underestimated how much of a difference that would make on the hills.
Yes.
And it turns out there's a lot of hills down south, which I thought it was.
It all goes flat. It's all goes downhill.
I've never been to Cornwall before. I spent a lot of time up in Scotland, so I was
Right.
like, it's down south, it's going to be flat, right?
Yeah.
And it's really not
It's
flat.
not that. Yeah.
So the first week was absolute hell, just trying to get used to.
Yeah, sort of acclimatising your legs to.
For sure. I mean, the
that
climbing was all right because the
Yes.
weather was quite good, but yeah, just getting used to cycling with such a. I mean, it had 4 panniers and a dry bag attached to the back of it.
Right. Okay.
So there was a lot of weight on the bike.
So when for overnights, what was the overnight? Were you camping?
Just camping.
Just camping all the way through it?
Yeah.
So you had the full...
Well, I did get one Airbnb in Bristol because one of the routes was at the Avon Gorge, and
Right.
I don't think wild camping in Bristol is something that you should really do.
Yeah, the body's probably not.
Yeah, exactly. But apart from that, yeah, just camping. So I had all the...
So your full camping kit, full
full
climbing kit, but I mean, a lot of it you did solo?
Yeah, so how I worked it was for the first part of this trip, a friend of mine called Marc Langley, who's a professional adventure photographer, he was doing the trip with me, he was cycling as well. And the idea was that he would, if it was raining or just like a particularly hard climb, he could simul climb with me. So I just had like a really basic trad rack, and I think it was 40 metres of 7mm rope. And in the end, because of some other commitments, he couldn't join me for the second half of the trip, but I kept that kit with me, and what I was doing in particularly bad conditions was just rope soloing with it,
right.
Which is, it takes a lot longer, but it is a lot safer.
Yeah.
But even that amount of kit's quite heavy.
No, well, yeah, as well as your camping kit and everything else, and just
and food,
comfort kit and food.
Yeah, because obviously sometimes it was kind of all right until I got up to Scotland, but once I was up there are places, particularly in the Cairngorms, where you don't know where the next shop's going to be or if you're going to be able to make it to it. So having a few days contingency is fairly useful.
Yeah, and then you've still got to pedal that up a big hill. Yeah,
exactly. Yay! You do go very fast going down there.
Yeah, I was just thinking
probably too fast.
So, well, how did that? I suppose how did it compare to from an expedition perspective? How did it compare to obviously completely different environment, but in terms of the suffering, the preparation, the whilst you were on, how did it compare that way? Mindset, I suppose.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as you said, they were completely different expeditions, but in terms of physical output, this classic rock one was way harder than Guyana. But it was physical output in a much less scary situation because it felt less committing because, you know, it's in the UK, there's not really any areas that are that remote in the grand scheme of things. So I never felt like I was somewhere where if something went terribly wrong, I couldn't get rescued from or, you know, I had phone signal the majority of the time. But yeah, saying that it was a lot colder because it's not in a tropical country, and my God, it rained a lot on that trip. I mean, it rained a lot in Guyana, but as I said, it's a hot country, so it kind of doesn't matter.
Warm,
But I mean, as you'll know full well, when it rains in the UK, it's just not that pleasant.
So how many days did the whole thing take? Because I know you had a small break in between, but what's the days from beginning to end? How long did it take the full thing?
Oh God, I'm not sure the exact number of days. It took me just under 2 months.
Right.
I had to take a week out to go and do a job up on Hoy at one point with Blue Peter, which was another story.
Did you get that?
I did actually, yeah.
Awesome. Made it worthwhile.
Yeah, but aside from that, yeah, all in all, it was just under 2 months.
Under 2 months.
Yeah.
Okay. And was there any particular low points that you would?
I would say the entire Welsh leg was a low point. Yeah, just because of the weather. It was really nice down south, and then most of the routes in Wales I needed to do were sort of in the Penny Pass or the Ogwen Valley, so like geographically pretty close together. And I thought at the start that getting them all done in sort of 2 or 3 days wouldn't be that difficult because you can just, you know, run between them and it doesn't take that long. But the day I arrived in the Penny Pass, it was really properly raining, and they're kind of too big, some of these routes. It's not like little gritstone routes that you can sort of snatch a dry 10 seconds and go up them. I'd never done most of them before, so in bad visibility I didn't even know where they went. So it kind of turned into, I think it was nearly 2 weeks in the end of just trying to wait out the bad weather, and if there was like a fairly dry afternoon, go up and try and get them done. But there was a lot of soloing in damp conditions during that week, which... And
how comfortable are you in that situation?
I was very careful. I mean, I do a lot of solo climbing, so it's something that I am quite comfortable with. But when I'm on sighting like that in bad conditions, I'm just careful to not do anything that I can't reverse.
Yes.
And then what I started doing on some of the really big climbs, like there was one up on Clwyd that's like 300 metres or something like that. Right. And when I went up there, the mist was down, so I could only see half of it. And I think the big danger on these things is just getting lost and ending up on like an E4 by accident, because that's definitely going to kill you.
Yes, that's definitely. Yeah,
so I started soloing with a harness on, with my trad rack attached, and carrying the rope I had just in a rucksack.
Right.
So I had options. I could either rope solo or I could bail in theory if I need. I never actually had to do that, but just having that there was always a good option.
And what about highlights?
I think highlights were, there was a particular route I really loved down south called the Devil's Slide on Lundy Island, which is just this like 100-metre slab above the sea in the most beautiful situation.
And you had the nice weather to complement
Beautiful
it?
weather for it, yeah. It was the only day I think that felt like a holiday on the whole trip. So that was great. And I think there was a route up in Scotland, I'm not sure if this is a highlight or a low light, but it's somewhere in the middle. There's a route called the Chasm that's on Berghaus Moor. It's like this big gully that sort of cleaves right up the side of the mountain. Yeah, 450 metres high, so it's massive for the UK. And the top two pictures of it, you go up this feature called the Devil's Cauldron, which is quite aptly named. And it's like this kind of overhanging groove with a waterfall coming down it. Apparently it's BS. I've done easier E3s than that. But I rope soloed it, and it was just a proper fight to get it done. Like it was the only time in the whole round that I really, because you know these routes are relatively easy grades, so I wasn't expecting to have to try that hard on them. But my God, that one I had to try hard.
Right, okay.
So getting to the top of that, I think was definitely a highlight.
Right. Getting to the top,
getting to
everything
the top
below
alive
was
was
a
highlight.
Oh, that's brilliant. So, I mean, there's loads you could talk about in both of those expeditions. I probably don't have enough time in the day. But I suppose the next thing is, and everybody will ask you this, I'm sure you've been asked this a few times.
Yeah.
But what's next?
What's next?
Rest, Christmas.
yeah, Christmas. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, what's next. I'd be really keen to do another kind of human-powered climbing link-up of similar to Classic Rock, but I'm not sure exactly what. And it'd be nice to take that concept, I think, to somewhere outside of the UK, maybe somewhere that rains a bit less.
Yes.
So I'd like to do that, and then I'd also like to do some more proper expeditions similar to the Guyana trip at some point too.
Kendal Mountain Festival's also got lots of inspiration, but it's got a lot of adventurers here that could be looking for adventure partners.
Well, yeah, you never know.
Take any opportunity as it comes.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, I'd like to talk more, but I think we'd probably be here for another 2 hours, and I don't want to bore you too much. But thank you very much for your time. I know it's busy, and you've got a couple of things you also got tonight for the film, for the big premiere, and you're at the Berghaus Women's Adventure.
Yeah, I'll be speaking at the Women in Adventure session tomorrow night.
Okay, and then anything else on?
Yeah, I've got a secret session this afternoon, which I know about as much about as everybody else does. I know the venue, that's it.
Okay.
So just told me the venue and who the presenter is and to turn up at a certain time. So yeah.
So, and will you get the chance to, obviously you get the chance to see the film tonight, will you get the chance to go and see anything else at the festival?
I'm not sure. I'm going to see. I've got some free time Saturday, Sunday, so it would definitely be nice to go and have a look at what else is on offer, for sure.
Excellent. Well, Anna, whatever you do in the future, we will be following, because we followed the past 2 expeditions, and good luck for the future and enjoy the rest of the festival.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Thanks for being here.